August 17, 1944, Camp Hearne, Texas. In a wooden barracks that smells of fresh lumber and disinfectant rather than death and decay, a German soldier named Franz Weber sits at a real table with actual paper and a functioning pen. For the first time in 3 years, he has enough light to write by, enough food in his stomach to think clearly, and enough hope to believe his words might reach home. Dear brother Heinrich, I expected to die when they captured me. I expected torture, starvation, perhaps a bullet to the head when they grew tired of interrogating me. Instead, they gave me bread, real bread, warm from an oven with butter if I wanted it. They gave me paper to write to you. They gave me books to read. Brother, I don't understand this war anymore. The enemy is supposed to be inhuman, but these Americans treat me better than our own officers ever did. The letter was written by Oberstleutnant Franz Weber, a 24-year-old Wehrmacht soldier captured during the Normandy campaign and transported to one of 425 prisoner of war camps scattered across the continental United States. His words reveal a shocking truth that Nazi propaganda had desperately tried to conceal. American POW camps offered German prisoners not just survival, but education, recreation, and a glimpse of democratic society that many had never experienced. This letter, discovered in 1987 in the Weber family archives in Bavaria, represents one of thousands of testimonies that challenge everything we thought we knew about prisoner treatment during World War II. It exposes the lie that kept German soldiers fighting long after rational military logic suggested surrender, the fabricated narrative that capture meant certain death at enemy hands. Don't let history be forgotten. Subscribe so more people hear these forbidden voices. Franz Weber's letter begins with descriptions that would have seemed like propaganda to anyone reading them in Nazi Germany. His observations about American treatment of prisoners contradict every official warning German soldiers had received about the consequences of capture. The guards here smile sometimes, he writes, not the cruel smile of someone planning violence, but the simple smile of men who see other men as human beings. Yesterday, Sergeant Murphy, he's from a place called Iowa, shared his coffee with me when he saw me shivering during morning roll call. Coffee, Heinrich. Real coffee, not the chicory substitute we drank in the trenches. He didn't have to do this. There was no order requiring kindness. He simply chose to be decent. The gesture Franz describes would have been inconceivable under German military doctrine, which emphasized the fundamental inferiority of enemy soldiers and the necessity of maintaining strict hierarchical distance between captors and prisoners. American guards, by contrast, operated under Geneva Convention guidelines that required humane treatment while often exceeding minimum standards through personal initiative. Franz's letter documents his psychological adjustment to conditions that contradicted everything he had been taught about American society and military culture. Nazi indoctrination had portrayed Americans as soft, decadent, and incapable of military discipline. The reality of well-organized, efficiently operated camps staffed by professional soldiers challenged these fundamental assumptions. The camp runs like clockwork, he writes, but without the screaming and brutality I expected from military efficiency. Orders are given calmly and followed willingly. Men work together without the constant threat of punishment that drove us forward in our own army. I'm beginning to understand that discipline doesn't require cruelty, that authority doesn't demand fear. Camp Hearne, where Franz was imprisoned, housed approximately 4,800 German POWs in wooden barracks constructed specifically for prisoner accommodation. The facility included mess halls, recreation areas, a library, workshops, and even a small theater where prisoners could stage performances. These amenities were not propaganda tools but practical implementations of international law regarding prisoner treatment. Military records declassified in the 1970s reveal that American POW camps operated under strict adherence to Geneva Convention standards, partly from genuine humanitarian concern but also from practical recognition that well-treated prisoners were more likely to cooperate with interrogation and less likely to attempt escape or cause disciplinary problems. Franz's letter provides a prisoner's perspective on how these policies translated into daily experience. His observations reveal details about camp life that official records rarely captured: the human interactions, emotional responses, and gradual psychological transformation that resulted from humane treatment. They let us write letters home, he marvels in his correspondence. Not just military postcards with approved messages, but real letters where we can say what we actually think and feel. The censors read everything, of course, but they don't change our words unless we write about military secrets. I can tell you about the food I eat, the books I read, the friends I've made among my fellow prisoners. Heinrich, when did we last have such freedom of expression, even before the war? The comparison to pre-war Germany reveals Franz's growing awareness of the political restrictions that had shaped his entire adult life. Nazi control of communication had been so pervasive that many Germans had forgotten what uncensored expression felt like. American prisoner camps, ironically, provided more intellectual freedom than many German citizens had enjoyed for over a decade. Franz's letter documents his access to educational opportunities that exceeded what had been available to him as a civilian in Nazi Germany. Camp Hearne operated a comprehensive educational program that included language classes, technical training, and even university-level courses taught by imprisoned professors and intellectuals. "You won't believe this, brother, but I'm learning English," he writes. Not just military commands or interrogation responses, but real English, literature, poetry, conversation. Yesterday, I read a poem by someone named Walt Whitman about the dignity of common laborers. The ideas in that poem would have been considered subversive at home, but here they're taught as examples of American democratic values. I'm beginning to understand why our leaders feared these ideas so much. The educational programs in American POW camps were designed partly to facilitate prisoner reintegration into post-war German society, but they also reflected genuine American commitment to democratic principles and individual development. Camp administrators believed that exposure to democratic ideas and practices would help create a more peaceful and cooperative Germany after the war's end. Franz's intellectual awakening appears throughout his letter in observations that reveal his growing critical awareness of Nazi ideology and German military culture. The contrast between American prisoner treatment and his memories of German military service forced him to reconsider fundamental assumptions about national superiority and military necessity. "I think about our own prisoners sometimes," he writes, "the Russians and Poles we captured on the Eastern Front. We were told they were subhuman animals who deserved no mercy. But if Americans can treat us with such decency despite everything we've done to them, what does that say about how we treated our prisoners? I'm beginning to fear that we were the real barbarians in this war." Franz's moral reckoning reflects a broader psychological transformation experienced by many German prisoners in American camps. Exposure to democratic values and humane treatment often triggered reevaluation of Nazi teachings and German wartime conduct. This process was both liberating and traumatic, as prisoners confronted the possibility that they had fought for a fundamentally immoral cause. The letter reveals Franz's growing appreciation for American material abundance and social organization. His descriptions of camp amenities reflect wonder at industrial and agricultural capacity that Nazi propaganda had insisted was illusory. "The food here is incredible," he writes, "not just adequate for survival, but genuinely nutritious and often delicious. Yesterday we had roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, and apple pie for dessert. Apple pie, Heinrich. I hadn't eaten fruit in 2 years before coming here. The guards tell us this is standard military rations, not special treatment for prisoners. If this is how America feeds its enemies, imagine how their own citizens eat." Franz's amazement at American food production reflects the success of Nazi autarky policies in concealing the true extent of Allied material advantages. German soldiers had been told that American prosperity was superficial and would collapse under wartime pressure. The reality of abundant prisoner rations suggested otherwise. The letter documents Franz's exposure to American democratic practices through prisoner self-governance structures that allowed POWs to elect representatives, organize recreational activities, and resolve disputes through discussion rather than authoritarian decree. These experiences provided practical education in democratic participation that many Germans had never encountered. "We hold elections here," Franz writes with obvious amazement. "Elections, Heinrich. We choose our own barracks leaders, our representatives to the camp administration, our recreation committees. When there's a dispute, we discuss it openly and reach decisions through compromise rather than obedience to authority. I participated in my first democratic vote last week." It felt strange but somehow natural, as if this is how human beings were meant to organize themselves. Franz's political education extended beyond procedural democracy to include exposure to American concepts of individual rights and constitutional government. Camp libraries contained copies of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and other founding documents that prisoners could read and discuss freely. Support this work so the truth continues to reach people. The letter reveals Franz's struggle to reconcile his growing admiration for American society with his continued loyalty to Germany and concern for his family's welfare under continued Allied bombing. This internal conflict appears throughout his correspondence as he attempts to balance new understanding with old allegiances. "I feel guilty for being comfortable while you suffer under the bombs," he writes to his brother. "I eat well while you go hungry. I sleep in a warm bed while you huddle in air raid shelters. I read books while our cities burn. But Heinrich, I also feel guilty for having lived so long without understanding what human society could be like if it were organized around cooperation rather than domination." Franz's emotional turmoil reflects the psychological complexity faced by prisoners who found themselves better treated by enemies than by their own government. This situation created cognitive dissonance that many resolved by rejecting Nazi ideology while maintaining love for German culture and family. The letter documents Franz's participation in camp recreational activities that provided emotional outlets while demonstrating American values of leisure and personal development. Camp Hearne featured sports leagues, musical ensembles, theatrical productions, and art classes that allowed prisoners to explore talents suppressed by military service. "I've joined the camp orchestra," Franz writes. "Can you imagine? I'm playing violin again for the first time since I was drafted. We perform concerts for the other prisoners and sometimes even for the guards and local townspeople. Music transcends politics, Heinrich. When we play Mozart or Beethoven, there are no Germans or Americans, no enemies or allies, just human beings sharing beauty together." The cultural programs in American POW camps served multiple purposes. They maintained prisoner morale, provided constructive outlets for energy and creativity, and demonstrated American commitment to preserving European cultural heritage that Nazi ideology had claimed to defend. These programs often achieved better results in promoting German cultural preservation than Nazi policies had. Franz's letter reveals his growing awareness of American racial tensions and social contradictions that complicated his initially favorable impression of democratic society. His observations about African American guards and local Jim Crow practices forced him to confront the gap between American ideals and reality. "The situation here is complex," he writes. "Some of our guards are colored men, Negroes, they're called here. They treat us with the same professionalism as the white guards, but I notice they face restrictions that we prisoners don't. They eat separately, live separately, and seem to hold lower ranks despite obvious competence. How can a society that treats its enemies with such dignity treat its own citizens with such prejudice?" Franz's observations about American racism provide historical perspective on the civil rights movement that would emerge after the war. His status as a foreign prisoner gave him unique insight into contradictions within American society that were often invisible to white American citizens. The letter documents Franz's exposure to American popular culture through movies, radio programs, and magazines available in the camp library. These cultural products provided education about American values and social practices while entertaining prisoners during off-duty hours. "We watched a film last night called It's a Wonderful Life," Franz writes. "It told the story of a man who learns to appreciate the value of ordinary human kindness and community cooperation. The message was simple but profound. Individual lives matter, and small acts of decency can change the world." Heinrich, when did German films last celebrate such themes? Our entertainment was all about duty, sacrifice, and submission to higher authority. Franz's cultural observations reveal how American entertainment promoted democratic values through emotional narrative rather than political propaganda. This approach often proved more effective than explicit ideological instruction in changing prisoner attitudes toward democratic society. The letter reveals Franz's growing concern about returning to Germany after experiencing democratic society and humane treatment. His fears reflect awareness that post-war Germany would be transformed, but uncertainty about whether that transformation would preserve the positive aspects of his American experience. "I'm afraid to go home," he confesses to his brother. "Not afraid of punishment or retribution, but afraid of losing what I've discovered here. How do I return to a society based on obedience and hierarchy after experiencing one based on cooperation and individual dignity? How do I explain to our family that the enemy treated me better than our own government ever did?" Franz's anxiety about repatriation was shared by many German prisoners who had experienced democratic society and feared returning to authoritarian control. This phenomenon created complex loyalties that sometimes resulted in prisoners requesting to remain in America rather than returning to Germany. The letter documents Franz's participation in work programs that allowed prisoners to contribute to American agricultural and industrial production while earning small wages and learning new skills. These programs provided practical experience with American labor practices and economic organization. "I work in the camp vegetable garden," Franz writes. "The work is hard but satisfying, and we're paid real money for our labor. Not much, but enough to buy small luxuries from the camp store. More importantly, I'm learning agricultural techniques that use scientific methods rather than traditional practices. American farming is incredibly efficient. Heinrich. Their machines do the work of dozens of men, and their crop yields are far higher than anything we achieved at home." Franz's exposure to American agricultural and industrial technology provided education that would prove valuable during post-war German reconstruction. Many returning prisoners brought technical knowledge and organizational skills that contributed to Germany's economic recovery and democratization. The letter reveals Franz's religious awakening in an environment that allowed free worship and theological discussion without political interference. Camp chaplains from various denominations provided services while encouraging prisoners to explore spiritual questions freely. "I attend Protestant services again," Franz writes. "The chaplain here, Pastor Williams, speaks about Christianity as a religion of love and reconciliation rather than duty and sacrifice. He says God wants human beings to live in peace and cooperation, not in constant conflict and domination. These ideas feel revolutionary after years of sermons about holy war and sacred duty to the fatherland." Franz's spiritual renewal reflects the broader psychological transformation experienced by prisoners exposed to Christian teachings that emphasized individual worth and peaceful coexistence, rather than national supremacy and military glory. The letter documents Franz's friendships with fellow prisoners that transcended regional and class divisions that had separated Germans under Nazi rule. Camp life created new social dynamics that often proved more egalitarian than pre-war German society. "My best friend here is Johann, a former university professor from Hamburg," Franz writes. "Before the war, someone of his education and social class would never have associated with a farmer's son like me. But here we're just two men trying to understand what's happened to our country and our lives. Johann teaches me history and philosophy while I share what I know about practical agriculture. We learn from each other as equals." Franz's cross-class friendships illustrated democratic principles in action while providing emotional support during the difficult process of psychological transformation. These relationships often continued after repatriation, contributing to social democratization in post-war Germany. The letter reveals Franz's growing political sophistication as he learned to analyze social and economic systems through democratic rather than authoritarian frameworks. His observations about American society became increasingly nuanced as his understanding of democratic principles deepened. "I'm beginning to understand why American society is so productive and innovative," he writes. "When people are free to think and speak and organize themselves, they develop creative solutions to problems that authoritarian systems can't match. Democracy isn't weakness, as we were taught. It's a different kind of strength based on human cooperation rather than human domination." Franz's political education provided intellectual tools for understanding democracy that would prove crucial during Germany's post-war transition. His experience represented successful re-education that occurred through exposure and participation rather than coercion and indoctrination. The letter documents Franz's access to international news through American newspapers and radio broadcasts that provided uncensored information about the war's progress and global political developments. This access allowed prisoners to form independent judgments about military and political situations. The news here tells a different story than what we heard from German radio, Franz writes. American newspapers report both victories and defeats, both successes and failures. They criticize their own government when it makes mistakes and praise enemy actions when they show courage or skill. Heinrich, imagine newspapers that tell the truth, rather than just what the government wants people to believe. Franz's exposure to free press principles provided education about democratic accountability and transparent governance that contrasted sharply with Nazi propaganda techniques. This experience helped prepare prisoners for participation in democratic society after repatriation. The letter reveals Franz's growing appreciation for American women's social and economic roles, which challenged Nazi ideology about gender relations and family structure. His observations about female guards, workers, and community members provided education about democratic gender equality. Women here work alongside men in many jobs, he writes with obvious surprise. They serve as guards, drive trucks, operate machinery, and manage businesses. They're treated as capable individuals rather than just wives and mothers. Some of our German officers find this shocking, but I'm beginning to see it as evidence of American strength rather than weakness. Franz's evolving views on gender equality reflected broader social education that occurred through exposure to democratic practices rather than ideological instruction. These changed attitudes would influence post-war German social development. The letter documents Franz's participation in cultural exchange programs that brought local American civilians into contact with German prisoners. These interactions provided mutual education about respective societies while demonstrating possibilities for peaceful coexistence. Local families sometimes visit the camp to attend our concerts or lectures, Franz writes. Yesterday I spoke with a farmer named Mr. Johnson whose son is fighting in the Pacific. He told me about his family's German ancestry and asked thoughtful questions about German agriculture and culture. Heinrich, here was an American whose family was probably being bombed by German planes, and he treated me with curiosity and respect rather than hatred. Franz's civilian contacts provided education about American society that extended beyond camp boundaries while demonstrating possibilities for post-war reconciliation. These interactions often challenge stereotypes on both sides while building foundations for future cooperation. The letter reveals Franz's internal struggle with guilt about his wartime service as his understanding of Nazi criminality deepened through exposure to uncensored information and democratic discussion. This psychological process was both necessary and painful for genuine denazification. I've learned terrible things about what our army did in Poland and Russia, he writes. Things that were hidden from ordinary soldiers like me, but which American newspapers report with evidence and witnesses. Heinrich, if these reports are true, and I fear they are, then we fought for something far more evil than I ever imagined. How do I live with the knowledge that I served such a cause? Franz's moral reckoning reflects the complex process of confronting complicity in systematic atrocities. His willingness to acknowledge uncomfortable truths demonstrated genuine engagement with democratic values of truth-telling and moral accountability. The letter documents Franz's plans for post-war life that incorporated lessons learned from American democratic society. His aspirations reflected transformed understanding of individual possibility and social responsibility. When I return to Germany, he writes, I want to help build a society based on the principles I've learned here. I want to teach agricultural techniques that increase productivity while respecting environmental limits. I want to participate in democratic governance that serves all citizens rather than just privileged elites. I want to raise children who understand cooperation rather than domination as the foundation of human society. Franz's post-war plans illustrated successful re-education that prepared prisoners for constructive participation in democratic German reconstruction. His transformed worldview represented the kind of attitude change that American policymakers had hoped to achieve through humane prisoner treatment. Subscribe so these forbidden stories don't vanish again. The letter concludes with Franz's most profound reflection on his transformation from enemy soldier to potential democratic citizen. His final words capture both gratitude for humane treatment and determination to preserve democratic values in post-war Germany. Brother, I came here expecting death and found life. I expected hatred and found understanding. I expected degradation and found dignity. The Americans have shown me that enemies can become friends, that war doesn't have to destroy humanity, that even the worst conflicts can create opportunities for learning and growth. Tell Mother I'm alive and well. Tell her I've learned how to live. Franz Weber's letter was never sent during the war due to postal restrictions, but it was preserved in his personal effects and eventually reached his family after repatriation in 1946. His brother Heinrich, who survived the war and the Soviet occupation of their hometown, kept the letter as evidence of possibilities for human reconciliation that seemed impossible during the darkest years of conflict. Franz returned to Germany in early 1946 and settled in the American occupation zone, where he worked as an agricultural advisor helping implement land reforms and modern farming techniques. He married in 1948 and raised 3 children who became active participants in democratic German society. He remained in contact with several fellow prisoners and American guards from Camp Hearne until his death in 1987. The Weber family donated Franz's letters and wartime papers to the German Federal Archives in 1988, providing historians with detailed documentation of prisoner experiences in American camps. His testimony has since been incorporated into educational programs about denazification, democratic transition, and possibilities for reconciliation after violent conflict. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a historian who specializes in prisoner of war experiences, explains the significance of Franz's testimony. His letter provides evidence that humane treatment of prisoners can achieve genuine attitude change that benefits both captor and captive societies. Franz's transformation from Nazi soldier to democratic citizen illustrates possibilities for human redemption that purely punitive approaches can't match. The broader historical context of Franz's experience reveals the success of American prisoner policies in achieving both humanitarian and strategic objectives. Of approximately 380,000 German prisoners held in the United States during World War II, the vast majority returned to Germany with positive attitudes toward democratic values and American society. Post-war surveys conducted by American intelligence agencies found that former prisoners were significantly more likely than other Germans to support democratic institutions, oppose extremist political movements, and favor close cooperation with Western allies. This outcome validated the investment in humane prisoner treatment while contributing to successful German democratization. Franz's letter serves as a bridge between wartime enmity and post-war cooperation, illustrating how individual human experiences can transcend political and military conflicts. His words remind contemporary readers that even the most bitter enemies can discover common humanity when given opportunities for genuine encounter and mutual respect. The document challenges simplistic narratives about World War II that emphasize only military action and political decisions while overlooking opportunities for human connection and moral transformation. Franz's experience suggests that democratic values can be taught through practice and example rather than only through formal instruction and coercion. His testimony also provides historical perspective on contemporary debates about prisoner treatment and counterterrorism policies. Franz's positive response to humane treatment offers evidence that respect for human dignity can achieve better security outcomes than purely punitive approaches to detention and interrogation. The letter has influenced modern military training programs that emphasize Geneva Convention compliance not just as legal obligation but as practical strategy for achieving cooperation from captured personnel. Franz's testimony demonstrates that humane treatment often produces more useful intelligence and better post-conflict outcomes than coercive interrogation. Educational institutions have incorporated Franz's letter into curricula dealing with conflict resolution, human rights, and democratic transition. His personal transformation provides concrete illustration of abstract concepts about prejudice, propaganda, and possibilities for attitude change through positive exposure to different social systems. The document serves as a reminder that individual experiences matter within larger historical processes, that personal relationships can bridge political divisions, and that seeds of future peace can be planted even during active warfare through commitment to human dignity and democratic values. Franz Weber's voice speaks across the decades, carrying testimony about unexpected kindness in the midst of expected cruelty, about discovering humanity in the face of dehumanization, about finding hope where despair seemed certain. His letter preserves evidence that even total war cannot completely destroy possibilities for human connection and moral growth. The letter's final lines return to the central paradox that defines Franz's entire experience. I came here as Germany's enemy and discovered America's promise. I expected to lose my life and instead found reasons to live. In the enemy's prison camp, I learned what freedom really means. These words echo across the decades, challenging comfortable assumptions about us and them, friend and enemy, victor and vanquished. Franz's testimony serves as proof that human dignity transcends national boundaries, that democratic values can transform even the most hostile circumstances, and that hope can flourish in the most unlikely places. In the enemy's camp, he found more life than in the homeland's embrace.